rise above the static, dissecting issues diplomatic. With mics in hand, they brave the storm of clashing views and norms transform. The Pundits Podcast, bold and true, shining lights on red and blue. Through heated takes and reasoned thought, they seek the truth that can't be bought. From climate change to foreign ties, they pause the spinning and sift the lies. No stone unturned, no topic taboo, as left and right come into view.
Hey everybody, this is the 19th episode, I guess, of The Conversation. We've been going at this since the summer. Thank you for some of you for leaving reviews to our little thing that we got going here. Please, more of you do it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And those of you who pay, we really appreciate we appreciate your support and you subscribing. We are recording right after Thanksgiving right now. So I guess we're going to talk about a couple things. We will talk in the paywall section about BAP and selective breeding and the birth of philosophy and stuff like that. We might have to do a multi-parter because I did read some of it, but I didn't finish selective breeding. It's not like, the easiest. It's relatively dense and abstruse, I have to say. But I'll offer some comments. People have been asking me to offer comments for a long time, and I don't care, so I didn't. But I respond to the populace. My democratic spirit is such that I will respond to the demands of the people. But first, I want to talk really quickly about some political stuff going on. So Jim O'Neill. So there's a couple of appointments that got my attention. So Jim O'Neill, who is he's an investor. He helped found the Teal Fellowships. He worked in the George Bush administration, and he went to Yale, and then he has some studied more at Chicago because he's a nerd. And he's been involved in mainstream Republican politics for a while. And then he worked at Clarion, so he's part of broader Teal world. He's not with anything associated with Teal right now, but he's a biotech investor. He's an advocate of anti-aging medicine, and he's traditionally had very libertarian politics. And he just got appointed as Deputy Secretary of the Health and Human Services (HHS) under RFK. And then the other person that I want to mention is I will just say ahead of time, I do consider Jim a personal friend. Over the last couple of years, we just hang out a lot, and when I go to SF, and sometimes he comes to Austin, and I really enjoy hanging out with him in our conversations, and we are of similar minds on a lot of topics. So Jay Bhattacharya is head of the NIH now, which I heard through the grapevine that Jay was actually probably going to head the FDA if Trump had won in 2000. So he's been in line for a political appointment for a while. So Jay Bhattacharya, I guess his legal name is Jayanta. He's Indian American. I think he grew up in the States, and he was born in Kolkata. So he's Bengali like me. And my joke is he's one of the 6 right-wing Bengali Americans in this country. I don't know Jay very well, but we have DM before. We don't know each other. We do know each other. We run in similar circles. And I will say that a friend of mine, a fan of mine, actually, I ran him into the Quillette Social a couple of years ago, and he saw Jay Bhattacharya at a party, and he thought it was me. Because we both have white hair, we're Bengali, whatever. Yeah. And so, that I'm sure Jay found that confusing. But anyway, so he's someone that's in my extended circle. We're definitely acquaintances, and I'm excited. Conservative or right wing or whatever, tech right, Twitter, social media, group chats have been very excited by Jim, and to some extent Jay. Jay is he's a bit more polarizing, and I think he has a lot of fans on, say, the tech component of the right, but Jim is of that, if that makes sense. Yeah. So it's one of our Jim O'Neill is one of our own, getting a spot. in the halls of power, where Bhattacharya is more of a fellow traveler, and there's still some disagreements about the things he did, the things he said, and his stances. And I'll get into that. But I've been talking for a while, Josiah. Like, what do you think? Like, what do you know? Like, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, the HHS picks to me are the Trump nominations that I have the most concern about. Overall, the picks seem to be pretty good, and it remains to be seen. Some of them, whether they can be confirmed, will they succeed or not? But uh, they seem to be in the right ballpark with the HHS stuff, especially with Kennedy, RFK, who's the nominee for the to lead the whole thing. I am a little I have some concerns about it. I think there's a positive case and a pessimistic case you can make about RFK for HHS. So the positive case is there's obviously a lot that's gone wrong in American, medicine, food, health, public health stuff. We're really fat. We've got all sorts of different disease, chronic conditions, and other things that are exploding. Whether that's, it's everything from, anxiety to allergies to autism, to other stuff. And at the same time, the medical scientific establishment, I would say, has a lot of problems, with the replication crisis, other things, Alzheimer's research, a lot of the basis on which that has been conducted for years and years turned out to be fraudulent and corrupt in terms of who gets funding, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of rot in the system. There's a lot of stuff that you might want to reevaluate and change. And, RFK is a disruptor. He could come in and do that. There are two things that kind of worry me about this. One is, yes, you do need to kind of reevaluate and change the system, but I don't know if RFK Jr. is the right guy to do it because he's such a crank, right? He's got a lot, and when I mention specific crank like medical views or whatever that he has to people, like I get a lot of defensiveness and pushback, and maybe he's right about this or that or the other thing. I mean, the way I think about it is, RFK's father was killed. He was shot by Sirhan, right? He was in a hallway of, like, he's going to the lobby of this hotel to give a victory speech, and Sirhan in a crowded hallway in the kitchen, I think, just shot and killed his father at point blank range. RFK does not believe that Sirhan killed his father. He thinks that there was a second gunman who also was standing behind his dad and shot him and killed him at point blank range, and no one noticed. Okay, so I just point this out that, like, that's a guy whose judgment I can't trust, right? If you want to reevaluate stuff, I don't know that I could, like, if he comes back and says, hey, actually the vaccine schedule is not great, or these specific, chemicals are leading to obesity or whatever, like, it's not going to affect my priors on that much, So that's problem one. And then the second issue that I see, and this is not his fault per se, but everything in America and in politics, it gets so polarized now that what I foresee happening is, like RFK, he's got a mix of stuff that I think is clearly wrong and some stuff that might be right about eating healthy and, different things. And I foresee all of that stuff becoming just like polarized now. So we're, in fact, you even start to see it already. Where, like, RFK Jr., he doesn't like seed oils. Seed oils are supposed to be very bad for you. And so I saw on X, some liberal guy had posted a video of him just like chugging Crisco or, canola oil or something. And on the flip side, I've seen a number of people who are trying to, who I suspect until a couple of weeks ago had no strong opinions on vaccines, all of a sudden they're like, well, maybe vaccines do cause autism. How do we know about this? So I foresee that could be a problem. It's all this stuff that um up until now it's just been lifestyle. It's like, what do what do you think about like beef tallow? Everyone's talking about tallow or yellow dye number 5, whatever. All that stuff could be hugely politicized, and like half the country is going to be like, no, I'm gonna give me the like extra fluoride gummy bears, and the other half of the country is gonna is not want to vaccinate their kids for measles or whatever. So that's I mean, that's RFK. He's at the top. Is Jim O'Neill guy? I don't know. I actually was not familiar with him. Everybody that I know says he's great. So, maybe I'll take that for what it is. Bhattacharya, I mean, I do have some issues with him, like some of the stuff he did early in COVID. I think we actually did a podcast early on in COVID because he did some studies about like that kind of implied COVID would only kill like 20,000 people, something like that. And it was pretty clear. Like, okay, it's early in the pandemic. There's a lot we didn't know, but it was pretty clear at the time that those were kind of garbage studies. Later on, I think he did do some good stuff related to like school closures and learning loss, other stuff. So his record's mixed. I don't think he'll necessarily be that bad for NIH, which also I think needs some serious reform. But I do kind of worry with some of that stuff. I was listening to an interview with him yesterday, just in preparation for this, and he was talking about how there needs to be a scientific review of the effects of lockdowns, and he said, and if the review doesn't find that lockdowns were horrible, then it's not right. Which is not like, maybe that's absolutely true. That's the right conclusion, but you're not supposed to prejudge the conclusion that way. So that's an issue. As far as I can tell, his that's an issue that's limited to COVID, which is kind of over. So he's probably, I have less concern about him at NIH than RFK because his whatever you like, the criticism you could give him is seems to be pretty restricted to that. Like he seems to be kind of like a credible, serious kind of guy otherwise, whereas like Kennedy is all sorts of stuff about like, I don't know, cancer is caused by drinking too much Diet Coke or whatever. It's just like it's an endless stream of stuff with Kennedy. So I don't, people, I think right now it's early. Trump isn't even president yet. People are still in the kind of like afterglow of the election. So no one wants like to hear this sort of Debbie Downer stuff, right? So I haven't been, I've said some things about it, but mostly my sense is when I talk to people, they don't really want to hear about it. And maybe it'll work out okay, maybe it won't. Either way, if President Trump or a senator calls and asks me for my opinion, I'll give it to him. But otherwise, I don't actually have that much control about like, if he gets confirmed or not. But I am kind of worried about that in a way I'm not for the other cabinet people. So now I've talked for a long time. So, if you have any reaction.
Okay. So let's like start at RFK. I've kind of said some things on Twitter, like a little spicy, whatever. I mean, RFK is just not my style. So, I mean, he is most of his life been a liberal Democrat. So all the magatards, and I'm going to call them magatards right now because it's like, come on.
Love. You say it with love.
Well, he's a liberal Democrat. And like now you're just like, defending him like he's your tribe, and I'm like, bro, like, I mean, he's a liberal Democrat. Like, he's got some views that you agree with. That's fine, but now you're like all on board defending him, whereas like literally a year ago or 6 months ago. So I'm just not down with that. I don't care that he's that liberal Democrat is not the problem. The problem is, like you said, like autism, all of his weird kooky views about chemtrails. He is basically a conspiracy theorist. That's his mentality. Also, let's bring up that he was under serious consideration to head the EPA in 2008 under Barack Hussein Obama. Basically, he was considered. Obama apparently, like I just read it like right before this podcast. Actually, Obama thought some of his views were probably going to get some heat from the Republicans, and also he like had a heroin arrest, and like back then. Having a drug arrest was a big deal. Like now, honestly, I just don't think that that's a big. People have not brought that up. Nobody cares that he did a lot of heroin.
I mean, it was back in the 80s, I think. So it was like a long time ago. But yeah, it's not.
Yeah, well, so let's I'm gonna do a little bit of psychoanalysis. He's a Kennedy. The Kennedys have a history being a little off. Okay, like a lot of them, like more than one of them has died in a ski accident. I think.
Right.
Okay, like they do a lot of dangerous things. Their psychological stability is not the best. Maybe if you want them to be a painter or some sort of performance artist, that would be great. I'm really not sure if they're actually suited. A lot of them are not suited to roles in government. I think that they are just like a little too crazy and wild as a family. Some of them are not, and those are like the more boring ones that eventually get tired of politics and are just like, I just want to do something normal. Maybe this is a massive selection bias in terms of who our political appointees are. A lot of his health stuff I don't necessarily oppose. Might have some good impacts, but if he takes his like anti-vaccination views and other things seriously, it's just gonna like cause a lot of problems because he's not gonna get people in HHS to go along. They will just rebel. I think they will just like ignore his. So in terms of vaccination, I just want to like add a little bit of nuance here, which some people, and I've talked about this before. My best friend from middle school died of an allergic reaction to an anthrax vaccine when he was being inducted for the Marines.
Yeah.
It happened within an hour. You don't know who's allergic. There's some people who are allergic in this country. And basically, the military just understands some people are going to die when you give the vaccine, but very few. But my point is, like, okay, like, in terms of, my friend Dan, that's his name, his parents, I just wonder what they think about vaccines because they have not been told about something like this. Basically, people are not told about rare, low probability events. And then when it happens to them and they're not like statistically sophisticated, their whole family probably is like, oh, they're lying to us about vaccines. So I think that there are some problems here. When you vaccinate a whole population, some people are going to have deleterious effects. I do think it is a problem when the authorities say it's 100% safe. No, it's 99.999%.
Yeah, see,
safe.
the authorities got it.
And that is actually really good.
That's the way it goes, I guess.
But there is that little minority of those people, and if that happens within your extended network, that just like impacts I think the trust a lot. So I think that's part of the problem. There are other cases where I do believe that there were, more in third world countries, there were some vaccinations that caused issues. So there have been issues. The problem is on the net, you look at our world end data, you look at any sort of statistical analysis, vaccines have been like, it's arguable which has been like more miraculous, vaccine or antibiotics. I think antibiotics is a little bit more, but they're within the same range of magnitude. They're just like not extremely good. And, I think RFK went to Samoa or American Samoa or something, and some anti-vax stuff happened a couple of years ago, and kids died of measles, So, there's some negative consequences of this. And that's why I think a lot of people blow their gasket about this and take the maximalist positions. So, okay, he's going to be Jim O'Neill's boss. Jim has said some good things about him online. He should, because that's his boss. I get it. Jim himself has some heterodox views. He's a big anti-aging enthusiast. I'm sure I haven't asked him about Brian Johnson, but I'm sure he's a fan of Brian Johnson who, wants to defeat death, like never die. A lot of people think that's like super weird. The issue here is, again, this is like the vaccination where a lot of this rhetoric, in my opinion, of like defeating death, that's like a stretch goal, which, okay, people probably think it's a low probability event, but reorienting our medical health system to actually think of what's happening near the end of our lives as a disease that we can ameliorate significantly could cause massive human well-being upgrades. And the NIH has funded basically the whole field of Alzheimer's research has been totally found to be riddled with fraud dating back to about 2007, I think.
Right.
This is a massive scandal. We don't talk about it enough.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there's a conspiracy, but like if I was a conspiracy theorist, I would think there was a conspiracy. And I don't know what we're gonna do about this sort of thing. That's why Jay at the NIH is something that I kind of do support at this point, because the system that we have has massive problems. In terms of Jay, I read the Great Barrington Declaration, and like they have stuff in there where it's like lockdowns might undermine support for vaccination. Actually, it's a short statement. In hindsight, it's not that crazy at the time, and like we were both there. We were both on the hawkish end of the COVID. I think we were, frankly, I mean, obviously in the early period, we were shown to be right. Like everyone around us was like, "Why are you guys acting crazy?" And we're just like, "Well, shit's gonna happen." Like,
yeah. I mean, the funny thing is, like, if you had told, there were two people. There were two types of people, I think, early on in COVID, right? There was one type of person who was saying, hey, look, this is a serious thing. We got to do something about it. It could kill, 1 million plus Americans, right? And then there's another type of person who is like, that's crazy. Like, COVID's not a big deal. You're exaggerating. And what kind of happened, at least on the right, is COVID did kill 1 million Americans, and the people who were like, "Oh, it's no big deal," claimed vindication. So it's like that's a weird thing, dynamic.
that's fair.
And to some extent, I don't know. And part of that I think some of that has to do with like the COVID end game, right? Because there was a period of time where people were kind of underreacting to COVID, and then there was a period of time where people were overreacting to COVID, if that makes sense. So for me, like I was a COVID hawk until we got the vaccines. And then once we had the vaccines, I was a COVID dove. I'm like, okay, look, if you want to get the vaccine, you can get the vaccine. You have protected yourself to the extent that you're ever going to be able to, and if you want to still wear a mask or whatever, like even now, I think it's a little weird, honestly, when I see people wearing the mask, but it's no skin off me, like whatever, right? If you want to do all that stuff, but like there's no need that, like, as far as a societal wide response goes, once you have the vaccines, that's kind of the end of it from my perspective, but that's not the way that people thought about it. Like most people, they were either dovish the whole way through or hawkish the whole way through. And so now the people who are doves look a little bit better, because what's the last thing people remember about COVID? It's November of 2021. And if you want to go see your like family for Thanksgiving, you have to wear a mask on the plane, and then they're telling you like, actually you should only have Thanksgiving outside with 6 people, and don't eat turkey for whatever, right? Like a bunch of stupid stuff like that. So they look a little bit better that perspective, but I do think people also kind of forget, like, a lot of people early on made a lot of dismissive statements that are just like totally wrong. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's there. I mean, I do appreciate that Jay put down numbers. Martin Kullendorf, other these people, they were INIDs. They were talking like tens of thousands.
Right.
So we got about 1 million deaths. Let's just call it 1 million even. It's more than 1 million, but let's call it in the U.S. 1 million deaths. So they're saying like tens of thousands. Like what? That's like 2 orders of magnitude ish, right?
Yes, right.
I mean, that's a big. So I'll tell you, actually, a mutual friend of ours. Well, I did like mention. I'm not going to say his name just to protect the innocent, but it's someone who you flew up to the upper Midwest for in his for purposes of his entrance into the Roman Catholic Church. So now you know who I'm talking about. As a he's a very conservative academic, like
JD, if you're listening, I'm
no, very very conservative academic. Like in terms of politically, he's conservative, and and he's very conservative. He's not like I would not say he's not center right. Like we're not talking like a squish. And he got into an argument in one of the channels that I run, just in group chats, mostly like let's just say like non woke scientists. And his problem with Jay is like the guy's got a PhD in economics. How could how could he be that wrong? Like, is he a liar? Is he incompetent? Like, what's going on? So Jay Bhattacharya, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, doctor as the Germans would say, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya has an MD and a PhD. He's an MD and a PhD in economics. He's guy's like just obviously a brilliant guy. How could he get that wrong? Is he lying? Like, so he's had suspicions, and this is because our friend here, he's he's a right-wing academic. He's very irascible, not a very politically oriented person. All he wants to know is what the truth is. And it annoys him that someone with a PhD in economics from Stanford would be that wrong. Like, what is going on there?
right.
On the other hand, I think Dr. Bhattacharya, he probably made the call on lockdowns a little early, but he was right. Right? In terms of yeah.
So and I can even see both from like a political perspective and from like motivated reasoning perspective. They're just like there were not a lot of people who were willing to say, look, like early on, look, lockdown, like COVID is going to kill a lot of people probably, right? But the lockdowns are still not worth it, right? That's a perfectly coherent position, but other than maybe like, Robin Hansen, someone like that, most people were not willing to bite that bullet. So what they ended up saying is, I don't like lockdown, right? I think that's a bad idea. And to justify that, they would say all sorts of silly things about like how COVID is just a cold or whatever. And, I guess maybe it sort of worked for them long term because people forget what they said. But yeah, like I have some of the same questions about these sorts of things. Is like, I don't, it's
well, yeah. If we could figure it out,
right.
The issue is like we don't have any academic background in epidemiology, but let's be honest. Like, I was hopeful about the low bound estimates. I remember I was trying to psych myself into it, but I didn't really believe it.
Yeah.
But we were talking in our channels. Let's just put it that way. In middle of February, we were talking hopefully less than 100,000. But
right.
it was kind of one of those. I think you were just straight up probably 1 million.
Yes.
But you're very negative. You're very negative.
Yeah,
so I was hoping let me just say 100,000, and I'm hoping that it's going to be 500. You know what I'm trying to say?
Right.
That was kind of what was going on in my head because I'm just going to say the lower number because someone's got to be anti-Josiah because Josiah's like, I think it's going to be 1 million. And people would be like, are you crazy? Well, it's like over 1 million, clearly.
Yes.
Right. It's exactly what happened. So it wasn't the worst case scenario, but it was a bad case scenario.
Yeah. And, in one way, like, I don't know, I actually don't know if it worked better or worse. I think the one, if I think back to like what my thoughts were at the time, and I think both the Hawks and the Doves kind of got this wrong, is we all kind of expected it to be over much quicker, right? Like I thought it would be 1 million, but I didn't think it would drag on for several years, And like the Great Barrington people, the part of the idea behind that was like, okay, we just take the hit real quick, get to herd immunity or whatever, and then we'll be okay. Whereas if you try and do the lockdowns, it's just going to drag things out. And the reality, I think, is that whether you did lockdowns or you didn't do lockdowns, it just took a lot longer, because everything kind of like happened at at a slower pace. So nobody's perfect. I don't want to claim to be perfect about it, but I do wonder, like, I do have this, if like people are wrong about all sorts of stuff, right? It's not surprising, but sometimes people are wrong about things where they shouldn't. It's like how like you shouldn't know this. Like even if your ultimate conclusion, is okay, like you shouldn't have made this mistake. And so in the same way that this mutual of ours is thinking, like, that just kind of like, it's like seeing a misaligned piece of wallpaper on the wall. I can't get past it.
Yeah.
Not match up.
Yeah, one last thing I will say, this is semi-known because like Jay's talked about this in public. He is a serious Christian. He's a Reformed Christian.
Okay.
And
I did not know
I
that.
happen to know. Yeah, you're judging him by his name and his brownness, but yeah,
Right.
yeah. Which, but anyway, I'm assuming he converted, like as an
Right.
adult or as college or something. But in any case, he's a Reformed Christian. I do know people that go to his church. It is a conservative. I'll just say it's a conservative Presbyterian church. I think that's what I remember. And I mentioned this because this is not well known. I mentioned this to a mutual of ours, another different mutual of ours who is actually like involved in MAGA world and probably will be in the administration. And when I told him this, because he didn't know either, because like he also is a Reformed Presbyterian, a conservative Presbyterian, and he was like, "Oh, well, that explains the lockdowns." So, in terms of like a lot of conservative Christians were conservative Protestant churches were super pissed that they couldn't do their services.
Right.
And and of course, like there were exceptions made for other groups.
Right.
Right. And so they have
legitimate. I mean, that's a perfectly. I never understood like what they did with the restaurants. And look, I like restaurants, but it was pretty obvious fairly early on that, like, given the way that COVID is transmitted, like you can't have a safe indoor restaurant experience, if like when like COVID is running rampant, and you can't do like, whatever you think about the efficacy of masks in general, it obviously does not work when you're eating because you're taking off the mask to eat. So yeah, it really, I mean, it did bother me, that like you couldn't go to religious services or whatever, but you could go to a restaurant or you could go like to a strip club, maybe. I don't know, pick your poison or whatever it was. So I think that's, like this, there's hundreds of legitimate things I think you could object to in the COVID response. I think it was pretty awful, right? Actually. Well,
there was a lot of irrationality, or a lot of things that were happening that people didn't want to talk explicitly about. So, for example, the restaurants is a tax revenue in a lot of cities,
right?
So they kept the schools closed because the teachers' unions had a lot of pull, and like kids are kids, like they're a drain anyway, right? They're not revenue generators, whereas restaurants are revenue generators.
Yeah, I mean, in Austin, they did. I can't believe they even got away with this, but the public schools were closed, so they were going to do Zoom school. But then they said, like, okay, if you, let's say that you are a parent and you have to work, either you are an essential worker or you can't be like keeping your kid in Zoom school. So what we'll do is we're going to have a place, which is actually in the school building, the normal school building. And we're going to set up a bunch of laptops, and you can bring your kid and have them there for extra. You can pay extra money, and we'll have like people there to watch them do the Zoom school. Right. So they're it's like, we're not doing school because it's unsafe, but we're actually going to gather all the kids in the same building and make you pay more money for it. Like, I don't know.
The irrationality, yeah. I mean, I don't mind. I mean, I'm not surprised that some people kind of went insane.
Right, yeah.
Because it was already insane. The issue here is like, our governmental systems are run by committee at different levels of hierarchy. and a lot of people are just incompetent and stupid, and so the execution is not going to be great.
Yeah, and unions, I think we're a big, like that was a big thing with the schools and whatever the unions. They care. I mean, some people in the education system are in it for the kids, and some people are like they view it as a jobs program, right? That's just the way it is. So, hopefully, maybe I'll try and overcome my nature and say like, maybe Jay will be good in terms of NIH and hopefully, I mean, at least with like DEI type stuff and other type stuff, hopefully they'll reform some of that and who knows.
Yeah. All right. Like next topic, I guess we're talking about Thanksgiving. I know it's a big deal in your family.
Yes.
Hi, bud. No. And Thanksgiving is also, it's weird. It's become I don't feel like it's the same with Christmas, maybe because Christmas is like a little bit more ad hoc and stretched out. The whole social political aspect and everything like that of like, are you going to have like conversations about politics or whatever, which I don't know. It's I don't know. When did that become a thing?
I feel like this seems like a kind of Vox thing to me. For a while, people would talk about like awkward political conversations at Thanksgiving dinner, which, to be perfectly honest, I can't recall that ever happening in my family. And as you know,
you have a mixed family.
we have a mixed family, so there are like Republicans and Democrats, pretty hardcore. But yeah, it just doesn't like to my memory, politics just doesn't come up. Maybe this is an issue in other families. I don't know, a different dynamic, but yeah, I mean, part of that I assume is like rise of polarization. It used to be like if you're in the 90s, it was back in the 90s. If you had Republicans and Democrats in the family, it wasn't as big a deal, because like that's just part of life, like, and the parties were not as sorted as they are now. Where like there were a lot of conservative Democrats and there were liberal Republicans, and you'd have people in the middle, and a lot more swing voters, yada yada yada. It wasn't quite the same degree of vitriol. Where now, like people on the conservatives think the liberals are destroying the country, and the liberals think the conservatives are fascists or whatever, and so maybe that makes it harder. But I kind of suspect a lot of it is just like a media creation. It's like you gotta write about something. Like I think this is like a secret of like journalism and punditry, is you got to fill the space, and especially like when it's a couple days before Thanksgiving, you don't want to be working that hard, Whereas if you're writing something about like how to deal with Thanksgiving dinner or whatnot, okay, that's easy. You can do it. It's not news cycle dependent. You can kind of like phone it in, and people will read it to the because it's topical or whatever. So I suspect that some of it is really just that, because I don't know. I mean, you are, Thanksgiving is it's probably the biggest deal holiday in our family of the year. And we have a big events. You've come to our Thanksgiving dinner a few times. Did you guys was Thanksgiving, in the,
With it was, but with my family, it's like, I would say, so my parents have been in this country for, well, almost 45 years now. And it's like, they became more and more American holidays. Like it was like frog boiling, where like now, well, not as much. Well, they still do it, but so I have siblings that are way younger, and like they were getting Christmas trees when they were little, and when I was little, they were not getting Christmas trees because they're like, that's Christian, and then someone must have told them that's not really Christian, or something. Do you know what I'm trying to say? But yeah, so like Thanksgiving, I mean, it's become a deal because we live very different places, and my siblings come and visit. I don't think I ever took my like kids to because like my kids do Thanksgiving with my in-laws more, honestly, because it's been a big deal for them. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a very natural holiday. I will say, there's some holidays where it's like, okay, we're gonna get. It's like St. Patrick's Day. I'm not Catholic. I'm not Irish, but I'm gonna get drunk and pretend. I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say? It's like, what are we doing here? Whereas with like Thanksgiving, that's like, as they would say now today, legible. Like it makes
Right.
okay, you get it. Like you're giving thanks and you're coming together with family, and everybody it's a coordination problem because
Yeah.
a lot of families, it's like they would love to get together, but like everyone's doing something at some point. But you
Right.
just say that this is a holiday, like figure out your schedule for that day.
Yeah.
And so that just like solves the coordination problem from the top down, right? And so I think like this stuff is necessary. The whole period between Thanksgiving and New Year's, it's like some economists say like, it's like really inefficient to like pack all these in and like there's labor productivity drops or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think part of the issue is like not everything in life is about efficiency and utility, and the standard economic sense doesn't capture everything. And to have like I do feel people are nicer starting around Thanksgiving. Trying to be a little bit more generous with people. And so yeah, I mean I think it's like the start of a very positive season. I don't understand why some people have tried to make it politicized. I do think the media aspect is part of it. But the cases that I do know, I have to be honest, are like people that have come back from college. And they have like the zeal or the fire of the convert, you know?
Right.
And they want to like talk about what they learned, and what they learned is crazy. And Uncle Roger's like, what the hell are you talking about? Because like it's not almost like he doesn't even want to argue, but it's the kind of thing where I've heard where it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. This sounds crazy. And that like elicits like a negative reaction. Like, well, actually, if you went to this small liberal arts college that I'm getting in debt to go to, there's some like defensiveness here.
Mhm. Yes.
So I think that's what I've heard about.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a good point, because as I think about it, most of the writing and like commentary or whatever I've seen on this topic is particularly like, if you're like, how do you as the liberal person deal with your conservative family members at Thanksgiving? I'm sure there are pieces that go the other way, but it's not as much, um, if like it's like how to talk to your liberal aunt, about tariffs. I don't know. Right. And maybe conservatives just have more self-confidence about this sort of thing anyway. That's possible.
Well, I mean, so I think part of the issue is Dick Hanania has talked about this a lot. Liberals are just like more obsessed with politics right now.
Right. Yeah. I think that's generally been true, to be honest, at least for like a long, long time.
So it's like if you're on the right, you're just like, okay, it's Thanksgiving. We do Thanksgiving things. We just chill out with our fam and have a little alcohol, whatever. Get like doped up on tryptophan. Yeah, pass out. Whereas like for like certain liberals, it's a teachable moment.
Right. Yeah.
It's just like, oh, okay. The equivalent that I will say is that annoying evangelical that like has to include Jesus into every single conversation. Now I get it.
Right.
Like Jesus is important to you. It doesn't need to be in every conversation. Right. Not every single one. Like maybe you have a rule like you're gonna hang out with someone, you're gonna mention Jesus once. Okay, let's do that. Let's just do that. That's okay. You got it. You got it. They know.
Jesus said yes.
Now they're thinking about Jesus, but it's just like bro, and it's like usually these are not people that have been Christian for a long time. Invariably, they're people that converted in the last couple of years.
Yeah, sure. It's like young love or whatever.
Yeah, and they're just like Jesus this, or it's like I like these cookies because I prayed about. And it's like no, that's not. I'm exaggerating, but there's some people that could go that far, right? Yeah. And so it's almost like again, it's just like they don't have a fully balanced sense of what this is supposed to be yet. So I guess we're talking about Selective Breeding and the Birth of Philosophy, which is by Bap/Constant Alamaru, and also like Bronze Age Bronze Age mindset. Hope you enjoyed the podcast so far. To listen to the rest of it, please go to conversation.substack.com.
Two minds met on a summer's eve, each with truths they long believed. Words flowed like a winding stream as hours passed in deep debate. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. In listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. It's not about who's wrong or right, but understanding others' light. In civil discourse we can find ties that gently bind. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. As dawn broke soft on dewy grass, they smiled and shook hands at last. Two souls enriched by reason talk, united in respect. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. This folk song captures the essence of a long, thoughtful discussion between two public intellectuals. It emphasizes the power of patient listening, mutual respect, and the discovery of common ground. The gentle tone reflects the common understanding they reach after their debate. Would you like me to expand on any aspect